started. So welcome to Making the Most of Visual Studio Online. Who am I? I is me. My name is A.Randell. I'm a partner with MCW Technologies. We are a small consultancy focused primarily on Microsoft stack. I'm a Microsoft MVP in Visual Studio ALM, which means I spend way too much time with this product that I'm going to talk about today, as well as the supporting members. I am also a trainer with Pluralsight. I do IoT training on my own, but I'm working on a video course with them. In fact, it's on Visual Studio Online of all things. And finally, I'm a co-author of the recently released, my wife's the books arrived on Monday at home. So Professional ALM 2013 from Rocks Press, you can take a look. Contact information is here, email, Twitter handle, and my blog. So let's get right to it. So what does this talk about? This talk is about Microsoft's new Azure-based service that was for a long time called Team Foundation Service. It is now officially known as Visual Studio Online, and you can find it at visualstudio.com. This is Team Foundation Server in the cloud, so where you don't have to create and maintain the server, Microsoft will do it for you. That said, it is a completely rewritten from the ground up system in that they didn't just take Team Foundation Server and put it in a bunch of virtual machines and put those up in the cloud. It is a cloud-based service. For example, the persistence layer that you have today on premises is 2 or more SQL Server databases. Up inside Azure, they use primarily blob storage for your check-in data, anything you put in, like attachments and that stuff. And they use SQL Azure or Windows Azure's database for metadata and collection information, things like that. So it's just as an example there, right there, the authentication architecture is completely different. So they've really redone things. And it provides a rich web experience so that any standards browser, so any of the major players, all work well. There's no ActiveX, there's no Silverlight. It's just HTML5 and JavaScript. That means it really is available to anyone who has an internet connection. And then ultimately, of course, it's focused on software development, so it means you connect with Visual Studio, Microsoft's Test Manager product, but you can also use Team Explorer Everywhere, which is a plugin that runs inside the Eclipse IDE. And with recent changes over the last year, you now can even use any Git client. So it means if you're using Xcode, you can check your code there. In fact, I did a talk yesterday specifically on the cross-plat aspects. So you can watch that at your leisure. So when we think about Visual Studio Online, what we're talking about is giving you the option to do ALM your way. Microsoft, since 2005, when releasing Team Foundation Server, has been trying to be the center of your development universe, providing you with that hub necessary for teams to build great software solutions. And so when we look at what Team Foundation Server has, we have source code repositories, test case management, the ability to have team rooms where we can interact and discuss what's going on, have an auditable history, the ability to do continuous integration builds, having agile planning tools that are something that can track what's going on but not get in your way. And even things like feedback management where we can have a tracked process of asking our customers and users what they think about a feature, and we don't have traceability through this entire process. And around the server, we have features that you can add on, like lab management, the ability to use Hyper-V and virtual machines to do automated testing, as well as to work on bug issues that customers are having in particular environments. Release management is a new feature in 2013 that allows you to do continuous deployment, so you can take output from your build and have it go through a deployment pipeline. Load testing has been in the product since the beginning, the ability to really see is your website and web services ready for prime time. Additional things like SharePoint integration, Project Server, and even System Center integration with things like System Center Operations Manager are all hallmarks of a great on-premises product. The problem is that running an on-premises product and installing it takes some effort. For a lot of development teams in particular, the problem with Team Foundation Server is that it is a real server. It requires care and feeding and proper maintenance. And a lot of teams aren't able to do that. In addition, there's all these things about, well, how do I properly configure it? How many team projects do I have? Project collections. I had a phone call with a potential customer telling me that they're on 2010 with 7 project collections and 58 team projects. Just so you know, that's bad, particularly for the size of the organization. So, it's decisions like that that can be an inhibitor to using the product, right? For a lot of people, it seems heavyweight. They like what it does, but I don't want to take care of it. So Microsoft created Visual Studio Online. And the key thing to note is everything under the quote-unquote rainbow there is the same. You want Team Foundation version control, great, you can have it. You want Git, you can have it. Agile planning, it's there. Team groups, all this stuff is available in the cloud. But there are some things that are a little different. Today we have, for example, a build service rather than standard build servers. The difference is this is an elastic build that they will allocate a build machine on demand as you need it. And so you execute things in the context of build minutes. We now have a load testing service where now you don't have to worry about setting up a lab, set up agents, deploying everything, getting it all configured. You simply deploy your load testing solution to the cloud, they spin up virtual machines as necessary, giving you, in theory, infinite load, something that a lot of organizations can't create on premises. Continuous deployment to Azure, the ability to take a website, make changes, check it in, and have it automatically deployed to Azure automatically. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. They have a new feature they're working on called Application Insights. The ability to see what's going on in your application and to be able to answer those tough questions about what features are our users really using and to find problems before they happen. This will be a service that they're working on that will work with anything that's internet facing or devices that can communicate across the internet. And we even have a new feature where you can actually do code editing online in your browser. We're in the initial stage of this. It's part of a larger initiative at Microsoft. And the core editing function actually showed up last year as part of SharePoint Online, the ability to make code changes to things like JavaScript and web files. And so Microsoft is really saying you can have it either way. You need to control the environment, you want to have everything on premises, great, you can do that. On the other hand, if you want to not have to deal with the care and feeding, you want something that's going to scale, be really good for large distributed teams across, when you've got teams across the globe, that's what Visual Studio Online is. So, how do you get started? Well, to get started, you really only need a Windows Live ID. And I'll go over pricing and availability and stuff in a minute. But fundamentally, if there's 5 or few of you, you can use it for free. And you get all the core features. Now, there is tiered features and thus tiered pricing. If you want some of the more advanced features, you have to pay to play. And there's different ways to do that. But let's show you that what you would need to do to get started is fire up a web browser. And I thought I had one, but I guess I didn't. Over here. There it is. And what I'm going to do here is start an in private session. Because I'm logged in with my live ID and because of all the magic they do to make it easy if you want, it already knows who I am. And so you simply go to tfs.visualstudio.com. And when you do that, they'll welcome you if they don't know who you are. As you can tell, it's asking me to sign in up here. There's 2 ways to get started. You can do the free trial right here, or you can click the Get Started for free. They changed the page yesterday, it looks like. I literally did the same similar demo yesterday morning, and they started their build conference over in the US, and so who knows what we'll see. There might be some new fun stuff today. It's always fun. So it's interesting is, regardless of which one you click, we'll try the green one first, and we'll see if it still behaves like it did. It's going to ask me who I am. Now the problem is, I'm already an account owner. If I log in with my brian@extensibility email address, it will just say, oh, we know who you are. You already have an account, and so by default, you can't create a new account. You can only be an account owner of one account by default. There are ways around this. It's not that hard. But their intent is one-to-one for now. So I'll need to log on with another address, and I'll use my daughter's address. Sadly, I did this demo before, and I found out that they have they don't have a problem with children creating accounts because it is free and there's nothing else. So I guess they're not too worried about it. So I had to delete it. So I won't go through the entire creation process, but I'll show you what happens. So log in, and oh god, what's your password though? No. Oh, one more try at this. I'm going to have to use my son's. I think I remember his better. Oh, that's not good. I can't remember her password. I do have it saved, but we'll do my son's because he doesn't have it either. Okay, I know I typed that correctly. This is not. I wonder if they changed it so That'd be great if they changed it after my complaints. One more time. There we go. Okay, so I just was fat fingering it. Okay, so this still works like it did yesterday. If you pick the green option, you'll get this set of settings over here on the left, and then the key is this big difference here where you notice there's no like OK button. You have to click one of these buttons. What they're saying is that, hey, you're new to this whole thing. Why don't you create an account, and once you download a trial of our Ultimate Edition 2013, or you can download our free versions. Obviously, if it's a trial that works for a period of time, they're going to want money from you after a certain period. I find this one annoying because, well, what if I already have it? Right? There's tons of us who have Visual Studio who may have not created an account. So I find this one a little annoying. So I'm going to sign out. And we'll go back to that home page, and we'll choose option number 2, the purple option. And it's still going to ask me to log in, so I'll log in again. This time, however, I get a picture here instead of the sales pitch, so to speak, and I do fill out the same data. The difference is I now have a big create account button. So that's what I find is a little weird about the previous set. They're trying to get you like, well, wait, so I have to download something to create. Well, you don't. That's kind of silly. So if I were to put my son's name, contact address, pick the region, and then I need to come up with an account URL. Now the account URL is, you can think of like your server name, in that this is how you'll access. So if I were to put MCW and click create account, it's going to fail because that's already in use. That's my company's. But if I were to pick something and then click create, it would go through a couple gyrations and it would immediately then take me to my home page. So I'm just going to log out as Brent and then close this window. And I'll go to mcw.visualstudio.com. Now I've already created the account. Now the only difference between what you would see and what Brent would have seen is that, of course, he doesn't have any existing team projects or any work. So the whole section in here in the middle of the screen that says recent, there'd be nothing recent, right? No team projects, no team rooms. Oh, look at this. How fun. Once again, I knew it would be a surprise. Look at that. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on. This bar right here you will not have if you create a new account. You only would have this if you had created an account at some point in the last year before November 13th when they went live, okay? So because I've been an early adopter, I'm on a special plan that gives me free unlimited access until, well, for another 34 days according to that message, okay? So you won't have that bar, and then like I said, the recent items will all not exist. Your resource usage will be less because you won't be on a free account, but other than that, everything else will be the same. In particular, all this about stuff will be here. So these are great ways to get started. All right, so once you've done that, then you're kind of off to the races. Where do you begin? Well, they really want you to create a new team project because that's where the fun stuff is. So you simply hit new. And then you pick a process template and version control. I'll talk about these in more detail. The key thing to understand is whatever name you pick for your project, you better like it. There's no rename. Arguably this is something that shouldn't be that difficult, and yeah, but someone's messed up in the beginning because it's been this way since 2005, or actually before then, since 2003 when the first pre-releases. You can't change the name. So, like it a lot. Developers or someone here, I don't care, I'll just make it something that'll be even funny. Oh, I'll change it later. It's like, oh, we can't. Oh, we're 6 months in, and if we want to change it, that means taking all our stuff out of the project, moving to a new project. Let's just say that's non-trivial, right? Particularly when you want things like history and the structure the way it was, and all the work item IDs to be the same. Yeah. So think about your name, particularly if someone has, some kind of complex about how you really want to name things in your organization, right? Some people are very stressed about that. Description can be changed anytime. These other two options, though, can't either. Once you pick a particular process template or version control back end, you're kind of committed, okay? So we'll just click create. And what happens behind the scenes is they queue up a job, and it gets popped into a queue, and they go out and they allocate some space for your account. And they do kind of this just-in-time allocation. They're going to basically make sure the name's available, go through, lay out some data structures, and then they're going to be done in relatively short fashion. A few more seconds. Looks like it's running good. Well, it's only 4 in the morning on the West Coast. Good. Okay, that's it. That's all it took. And when you click Navigate, you now have a team project. So literally in under 5 minutes, you should be able to get started. Can any of you guys get a server set up in your organization that quick? Right, you can't even install TFS that quick. You know, you can install it in about 30 minutes or less, depending upon your setup. But really, this is the benefit of this: is that they take care of everything. Your data is backed up at 3 levels because they use geo-redundant blob storage for all your artifacts. And one thing that I do want to point out that is new, that they turned on yesterday, is data exports. So right now, up until now, if you want to get your data out, you did it the manual way. You can take the tip of your version control repository, you can copy out your work items using things like Excel or the API, but they didn't have a give me my entire set of history of work and bring it down. This is a new feature they've been working on. It's available in trial format until May 20th. So this is new. And I've gone through it. It's not that bad. You basically kick off a job, and while that job is running, you can't use your account because they're backing up your data. And they basically give you this configuration file that you load locally into your Team Foundation server, and then they suck down all your data and put it into your local on-premises copy. So you get a point-in-time snapshot of the way things are. Now, a couple things about the way it works right now is that it is, of course, the snapshot. So if you go and change things in the cloud again, well, you're out of sync. There's no replication model. And the other thing is you have to be on the current version of TFS and the current updates. So if you're on premises right now on, say, 2010, you're looking at, well, should we go to the new one? Hey, let's try this new thing. Oh, we like it, but we're going to stick to 2010. You can't do that. And the other thing you notice is only available May 20th. And the reason is they're doing some engineering effort on some new work and features, and the cost complexity of making it so that you can take backups from now to then later, it just wasn't worth it. So they're going to take this offline on May 20th, and it will reappear later. Now, one thing they're trying to do right now is get a lot of tests and get feedback. What do people like? What doesn't work? What, is it everything you want it to be? And then they're going to do these changes over the summer, and then the expectation is that it will reappear. But in either case, you can really get started very quickly. Now, once you come back here, here's the new team project, and you're kind of, it's like, okay, what do I do? There's lots of stuff here. And so those helpful get started things will show up, but you're here at this talk, so I'm going to go through and tell you what you would do from here. But at this point, I have an account. I can start adding people, I can start checking the code, I can start creating work items to track my work, I can make builds, I can do everything with this setup. So let's go back to the slides for a bit and talk about the service and why you might care, and see whether you want to stop being in the talk and run away because it doesn't fit your financial goals or whatever. So why? Well, number one, you can get started quickly. In fact, they want everybody to have a Visual Studio Online account. So it is free for up to 5 users. Now, there are a base set of features you get, and then, like I said, there are some premium features that you can only get if you pay for. But for any small team of 5, for sure, or even the team of 1, it's a great product for free. You get a lot of good stuff. And it's really good, that cross-org, cross-geography collaboration. One thing that's been really good for Extensibility, we're a small consultancy, and we work with a lot of our friends that you legally subcontractors, but they're friends, we work together, and we do things on an ad hoc basis. And these are all the guys that have their own consultancies, their own email addresses and stuff. And when we did things up to have Visual Studio Online, we had to set up Active Directory domain accounts inside our domain to connect to our TFS server. They had to set up VPN access, all that stuff. And now I don't have to worry about that. I get their live ID, add it to the account, and boom, you're ready to go. And when I'm done, I can just take you out. It's just a very simple setup that works really well. Now the downside is if you think about this for a large organization, that might not work, and we'll talk about that in a second. But really easy to get started, cross-org, cross-geography. Lower operational cost. There's no question about it, particularly when you start about free, right, compared to even the cost of running a server 24/7. And these are thinking about things like backups. And backups aren't interesting. What's really sexy is restores, right? Well, how much time and effort do you put into that to really see, can you do full disaster recovery? And usually the organizations I've worked with, and most don't. I hear a lot of them have backups. I hear that a lot. Have you tried restoring? And I'm just talking, just go to another SQL server, do a restore. Make sure the restore works. Then there's the, can I actually restore it so I can use it, right? And that, of course, requires a lot more effort because, I've got my production server. So I now have to set up at least a virtual environment. And then if you've got a database and say, 50, 60 gigs, terabyte or two, that's non-trivial, right? Not your problem, right? It's Microsoft's problem. Continuous feature delivery. Now this is an interesting one. You noticed my joy when I logged in and said, they've changed something. Now the good news is that I'm an MVP. I am blessed with the ability to get tormented with new features. I sign up. My account has the, yes, give Brian new features whenever we feel like it. Great. But it turns out the entire service is on an active delivery model. In general, they deliver new features every 3 weeks. Sometimes they're small and tiny. Sometimes you don't even really see anything. But lately, definitely over the last, I'd say about 6 months, the delivery features have been always a little bit of something to show you. In other words, something that will be visible to you as a consumer of the service. In other words, not just plumbing changes, okay? And then we have, on different cycles, like this week in build, we're going to show off a bigger feature, like data export. That may not be what you want, right? On one hand, developers, a lot of us are really geeky. We like the new shiny stuff. Ooh, The problem is if you're a manager running a team, you might not want that shiny object center, which is you log into your homepage, also there's, someone moved your cheese, right? What's going on? Hey, what happened? And they don't do that a lot, but the UI has gone through a couple changes over the period where I've logged in, and granted, I got it, a few weeks before, so it wasn't as shocking, but it was, wake up the next day, it's different. And for customers, people that are not on the update train, or the early adopter train, you're on this. There is no opt-out at this point. When they decide to roll out a new feature, you get it on update Tuesday. That's just the way it works. And so that is on one hand a very positive thing because that means as you're maybe needing, God, if Microsoft only had this, it would make me so much happier. Oh, there it is. Right? I mean, that's great. A good example is around tags. We would complain that you couldn't search for tags. They added tag search, and then people said, it'd be nice if I could have security around tags so people wouldn't change it. Well, if you're on the service 6 weeks later, you've got that feature, right? Whereas on premises, that feature will show up, but it takes longer. Now that said, Microsoft even has the server and the client on a much more aggressive update cycle. Traditionally, Visual Studio Team Foundation server upgrades were in the year cycles, right? We would see, we'd have a service pack, they'd add some things. But it generally was a good break between it. Now, they have a quarterly update schedule. And they started that with 2012. And they did 4 updates. 2 out of those 4 updates were significant updates in feature sets as well as bug fixes. Update 4 in particular was a bug fix only. There weren't any real new features added. And they started the same in 2013. They did a quick update 1 for the client only, and that was definitely mostly bug fixes. Update 2, which is shipping soon, it's currently in release candidate stage, is going to be available for both the server and the client. And from the server perspective, it adds features that have been on the service now, in some cases, for a month or 2. A good example is the ability to pin charts to your homepage. That's something I can do in the service that I can't do on premises until I install Update 2. So, it's one of those things you have to decide. And finally, Windows Azure integration may or may not be something that's important to you. For the work I do, I do a lot of work for Microsoft, so it's a big thing, but I host my personal BrianRandell.com website there. The fact that I can have continuous deployment is really awesome. In fact, I want to show you that because I want to get something going in the background so we don't have to stare and kind of go, is it done yet? And we'll see. So if I go over here to my web browser, and I go to BrianRandell.com, you'll see my vanity webpage, and it's a tour de force of style. So I have these things here and stuff, but what I have here is the next show, okay? Now, depending upon how you host your website, it may be trivial to go in and change because you can log in, edit a web page, log out, or you might have to go through some CMS, or it might be the process that you do a ticket request, someone makes a change, they check it in, it goes through test, and there's just put to production. Well, there are some benefits to that, right? You have traceability, you know why it was done, you have the ability to do rollbacks, etc. What if I could have kind of the ease of just making a change, but get all the traceability? That'd be pretty awesome. And of course, I can do that. So I want to change this and actually say, hey, I'm here now, right? Say hello. And for a couple reasons, I want to prove a point, and I'm going to go over to Visual Studio 2012. The service is available to Visual Studio 2010 SP1 and higher as far as Visual Studio clients. That said, you might have to have a newer client to take advantage of newer features, right? Some of the way the work items works and the new features require newer versions. And definitely if you want Git support within Visual Studio, you need at least 2012 and an update to plus a patch, or it's built into 2013. So this is Visual Studio 2012. And my website, because I'm a geek, it really just is right now HTML, but I wanted to maybe eventually add some code to it, so it's an MVC project. And so I can simply go over here and open it up. Yes, and that is something to do with something I've installed that we will discuss. And I'm going to bring up zoom in so you guys can, if I need to zoom in. All right, we'll get rid of this. Yes, I know there's an update to that. There's always an update. All right, so what we see here is my index.chtml. And the first thing I'm going to do is come over here to source control. And I'm going to seek it to make sure I have the latest version. Okay. And so I do have the exact same text here in Visual Studio as on the website. All right. So what I'm going to do here is come over and just do a quick change. Probably break some grammar rule there. Do it like that. Okay, I've made a change. Come over here to pending changes. And just so you know, the repository is using Team Foundation's server version control, because when I created this, it was before they had the Git support. Whether or not I would choose that is a separate discussion. So now I'll come in here and put a comment. And I'll click check in. Now, my website is being hosted in a feature called Window Azure Websites. And so what's going to happen is, if I come over here to my home page, we have a feature for builds. And it turns out that we have continuous deployment builds, which means that when I check in, I first get a continuous integration build, in that it picks up my change and automatically starts a build. So it's going to allocate a build virtual machine. I'm in the queue right now, and at some point it's going to start. You see I've run some builds over time, so I'm seeing my history, and I can hover and see that last one, that one took 2.8, the most recent one took 2.4 minutes. So in about 2.5 minutes, I should get a new version of my website. So if we go back over here, we'll leave that page up, and I'm going to log into Windows Azure. And I'm going to log into my account. Now, I'm an administrator on a number of Windows Azure accounts, so I'm going to have to go ahead and filter out to just my A.Randell.com account, so we'll do that in just a second. Oh good, it's thankfully it's remembered my last setting where I was just in here. So you notice if I go to websites, there's my A.Randell website. And if I click in here and go to my dashboard, we can see the stats for my website. And if we come down here, we get all sorts of good stuff. But you'll notice I have this option here. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one thing I need to put zoom it inside the view, because when you're full screen, it can't do its magic. So we'll come over here. The nice thing is that it's a simple exe. I can copy. And I can run it inside the VM, and ooh, now you're happy. So if we come over here, you'll notice up on the menu bar, deployments. And if I click that, you'll see my active deployment, but you'll also see I'm deploying now. Right? It knows that I have kicked off a build, and if I refresh this,
Is that continuous deployment setting you can turn off?
yes, absolutely. So my build is done, okay, and now we're just waiting for Azure to finish it. And yeah, this is something I've opted into. This is something that's by design. It doesn't make you do that.
So you can have the continuous build running and then select a build to deploy.
Yes. Yeah, you can do it separately, absolutely.
You can deploy to a staging or something like that.
Yeah, well, this could be set to go to staging as it is. Yeah, it's not a problem.
So continuous deployment to staging, but managed deployment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's different levels, right? What I'm showing you right here is the great version that if you just run through the wizards, it all works. You want to tweak things, it's more involved, but you definitely can do it.
Well, are these a feature of Azure, or
It's a combination of both. It's these two working together. They do special stuff to make this seamless. If you wanted to say deploy to Amazon, you're on your own. You can do it, but they don't make it the way it is here. I mean, literally, you all could go sit down. We could all do this for you. If you assume you have accounts, we could probably have a website deployed in 15 minutes. It's that easy. I mean, it's click, bind, do these things. And they do some stuff automated. They make some assumptions, like they'll pick if you have only one solution, they assume that that's what you want to deploy. I mean, they do things. If you have more than that, you have to make some choices, and you might make some little changes.
with the MVC application, does it sometimes take a while to buy it on the public website?
What do you mean?
So I've had some examples where we've been messing around with this, and we made some changes to a controller or a view, and then you go to the site and you don't see the change.
No. Watch. Ready? Refresh. And is the deployment not done? Oh, I haven't switched over. Let's check the deployment.
So are you using the web deployment tool, is it? From scratch?
No, it's got its own, it's custom infrastructure. This is something in Azure websites. So it's not, you're feeding it to Azure, and they handle the switch over between. So it hasn't switched over yet, is where we're at.
Okay, so you're using the deployment, automatic deployment.
Correct.
So I think I was using the web deploy function.
Yeah,
in the
that's,
Visual Studio.
yeah, I don't, no, I'm not gonna go further because that's deployment stuff. The point is that this, what you get with Azure, is built in, it's transparent, it's something that they built extra infrastructure around. It's not just them calling web deploy or whatever it is. They've done extra work. If you want to go to Azure, your choice, or Amazon, your choices would be whatever Azure or Amazon, too many A's, what Amazon has, or whatever, however you want to write your deployment mechanism, so to speak. But this is a custom implementation. Oh, okay, there we go. It was actually done. I just had to scroll down. Okay, so that's an example of the things they're doing, and this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, as to level of integration. You can deploy to cloud services. You can deploy to other parts of Azure from there. There's just different levels of out of the box versus going a little further. If we look at the build definition, you'll see it uses a custom build definition that they created, they put in your account when you enable this. And so if we look at the process, we see it's a specialized Azure Continuous Deployment template. And once it loads, you'll see we have some information down here. And if you're doing general, it just has the settings file you're using, whereas if you go further down, and this settings file comes from Azure, for whatever reason, Visual Studio does not want to scroll down. That's weird. Still alive. Let's try this again. There we go. The scroll bar is just dead. How weird. But you can see they've done extra stuff specifically for Azure Cloud Services. And then for Azure website, you can also use a web deploy publish profile and do additional changes in configuration. Within the context, Azure websites are by default shared hosting type of environments. Behind the scenes, of course, there's IIS. That's what's going on. And the key thing here is less about we're doing it as a website, is that the larger picture, right? I made a change, I now have check-in history, I could have done work item association, and I get the benefit of build, and of course if the build failed, it won't deploy. The other thing is that even if everything appears to be good, and I find out it's not good, I have the choice of coming in here and going to Azure and saying, you know what? Get a refresh. The danger of doing anything when Microsoft is doing a release. That is really weird. It's still saying that this is the active one. Great, we now have a bug. The point is you can come in and you can switch, and you notice you can redeploy and go back to your previous version. They maintain a history of 5 of your last deployments. Exactly. And the other thing is, mine's just a website. You can also include databases if they're within the setup of what they're doing there. So depending on what you're doing, it's a really nice setup. It shows you just the long-term vision of where they're going, right? It's kind of a hint at the roadmap. Okay, so that was all pretty nice and good. And there's a method to my madness as to why I wanted to do that, because I'm going to show you some other stuff. In either case, let's dig deeper into the product. So you might have to ask yourself, is it for you? Obviously for a small team and for 5 years or less, it's no-brainer. Everything I've showed you so far is free. For builds, you get 60 minutes of build free, and I'll give you some more detail on that. That's because there's a hard cost for them about that for allocating VMs and what they have to do. If you want more, you have to give them a credit card for that. A team of just about any size, right? They work with large teams. My project, we have over 50 users on our account, no problem. And I know there's teams that have large, I know with the Rangers teams, we have a few hundred of people. So there's no issue on size, but it might not have all the features you need for very large teams or large organizations. Definitely a good place to, hey, I haven't looked at TMS in a while, maybe you tried it in 2005 and didn't have a great experience. Rethink it this way, you can try without installing a server, right? For those core features, everything's the same, right? Probably the biggest difference between the two is that on premises I can do customization to things like work items and the workflow, whereas in the cloud, you're on the latest version of the way it works and there's no customization today. It's on the backlog, but we don't have a commitment date of when. At the end of the day, also just your own projects. It's a great place if you're a geek. I mean, any geek worth of salt does coding on their own. It's fun. It's what we do. And so this is a place you can keep all your stuff, track what you're doing, etc. It's really nice. If you're comparing though for your organization, you might need to understand what's here today and what's not at the high level as well as some of the details. You notice there's a lot of parity on the core features, right? And in fact, it's even better when you think about setup administration and the ability to work with anybody. That said, there are missing features. The big four would be things like virtual test lab management, SharePoint integration, data warehouse and reporting. Those don't exist. Now, if you start breaking them down, virtual test lab management, that's going to come. It's a no-brainer. It's just a matter of you can only do so much at once, right? They would have spent all they did to have an on-premises project and say, oh, we got this thing Azure that makes it easy to do VMs. We're not going to give you anything. Problem is they're not talking, right? So is it this year? Is it something we'll find out in the summer? Who knows? But a betting person knows that they're going to get into this space. It's a given. SharePoint integration. Once again, there's different things to consider what that is. Well, part of it, you need a cloud-based version. Oh, we have SharePoint in Office 365. Maybe we could do some stuff there. Okay. The question is, if you get a chance to rethink it, the version of the way SharePoint works is basically the same way it worked from the beginning back in 2003 when they started writing it, 2005 when they shipped the first version. They've done some enhancements, the dashboards are better. But at the end of the day, it's still, it's a thing you can use, but you don't have to have it. So if you could rebuild it, especially if you had the cloud, what would you do? So maybe we would rethink that. But then there's this next problem that kind of affects the SharePoint integration story, as well as the next one, which is a SharePoint and Office 365 uses what's called organizational logins. Right? You log in with an org account. And that's a backend problem that Microsoft has to work out. But with Visual Studio Online, you use a live ID. You use a Microsoft account, a personal account. So they got to deal with that. So that's kind of the thing inhibiting SharePoint integration. The second problem is we don't have data warehouse and reporting. Why? Well, because the SQL Server team to date has not created a cloud-based version of analysis services. And then for reporting, they did flirt with it, but then they came out, well, it's been a few months now, but they basically said, you know what, we've decided we're not going forward with SQL Server reporting services in the cloud. If you want to do it right now, just set up a SQL Server VM. That's their current answer. So this puts the TMS team in a weird position. What do we do? And it turns out that one of the key points of SharePoint integration, beyond SharePoint features, but one of the key TMS integration is the dashboard feature, which uses reporting services. So they've got a chicken and egg. So you can see these three features here together have some symbiotic relationships that affect their ability to deliver. Now, Active Directory integration, that's high on the backlog. That's coming soon. They're actively working to get that out so that you can bring your organization to TFS and use the same ID that you use in your corporate environment to log on through Federation to Team Foundation service, to the Visual Studio Online. Oh, so once they have that, that would even open the door to org authentication, because that works with Office 365 already, and then you start thinking, okay, so SharePoint could come sooner than later, but there's this reporting block that's missing, which means the TMS team has to sit down and say, what's our new reporting story for the cloud, right? Are we gonna host a bunch of SQL Server VMs? I doubt it. That wouldn't make sense to me. But they built this great cloud service and suddenly, that wouldn't make sense. So we're right now at this point where these are red. If they're super important, you need to hold off, right? Now, Virtual Test Lab Management, even today, you can get this to work. There's things you can do. It just requires a bit of customization and a little custom code, but it's doable. SharePoint, same thing. You can do some stuff, but not as much as you want. And reporting, you're kind of on your own. Now, how do you get it? Well, 5 people, free, 60 minutes to build a cloud build a month, done. No credit card, just enjoy. On the other hand, if you have an MSDN subscription, any of these in the list, you get free access. So that means, let's say you have 10 people. Well, you get 5 for free, but if the other 5 have any of the MSDN subs here, so basically Pro or higher, or what's a special one called Platforms, which is primarily the enterprise option, you're good to go. Free access. Okay. Now, on the other hand, let's say you're an iOS developer, and there's a team of 7 of you. You get 5 for free, you need 2 more. Well, you have your choice. You can get them the same level of access as your free access for $20 a month US. So, based on the exchange rate and the way they'll do the pricing, I'm sure it's £20 a month. At least I've seen that with Apple, right? You know, you're going to buy an iPad, it's $699. Over here, it's £699. That doesn't make sense. And that's before that. That's my favorite, right? It's like, what the? I've definitely seen that in Australia. I know it's not as bad here, but the point is, you don't have to check your local pricing. But the point is, it'll be relatively cheap, and that's about the same. Now, they have this special plan in the middle there. $45 a month, up to 10 people. It gives you access to the account, and it gives you Visual Studio Pro on a subscription basis. Okay? Okay, interesting. You start doing the math though, at $25 a month extra, right? So that's going to cost me $300 a year. For 3 years, I could have just bought Visual. You start doing the math. You kind of, is this the right thing? Okay, maybe. And then only it's up to 10, right? So it's kind of a teaser, right? Get you sucked in a little more. If you want the advanced features, which I'll talk about in a second, this is $60 a month. At that price point, you're kind of going, these things look really attractive. Right? Especially you look at EA agreements, volume agreements, 3-year plans and stuff. Yeah, that is priced that way, in my opinion, purposely, to really push you to look at this. Right? Yeah, you have 1 or 2 people, maybe, okay, you'll do it. But even then, your brain's going, they have to be a full-time Java developer or an iOS developer to where you would, okay, we'll just do that instead. But that said, they even have this puppy dog right here, the platform sub, and once again, pricing is available. This is something that's, unfortunately, you have to negotiate. And whenever you talk Microsoft prices, always make 3 phone calls, talk to 3 different people, right? Because you get different prices. Because no one should pay retail. in my opinion. Platform is really designed for Java developers, iOS developers, etc. Because it gives them access to the core features, but they don't get Visual Studio and things like because they don't use it. Okay. So the point is, you can do this, but good accounting and doing some mathematics will tell you, this probably is a better deal. But it is an option. That said, what's the difference? So green is basic, all the core things. Now, when you get to the advanced level, which you notice is listed here as a pay option, okay, or obviously, you notice this is plus, so all the higher end VS SKUs here, including platforms, get Agile Portfolio Management, which means higher level enterprise features, the team rooms, work item chart authoring, the ability to request and manage feedback are considered advanced. And they continue to add new features that will be put in these different buckets. Now, exclusive is web test case management. The ability to do that requires one of these SKUs. You can't buy it separately. And if you're curious, Test Professional is basically the catch-all SKU for anything that is like a project manager, a business analyst, a tester doing advanced user acceptance testing, those kind of things. That's the SKU buy. Even though it's called Test Pro, they just didn't want to add another SKU that was called the business analyst SKU or the advanced user SKU. It's all Test Professional. So even if you're not a tester, that's your gateway product. Okay? So if you are an MSDN subscriber already, particularly if you have premium or above, Visual Studio Online is super attractive because it's effectively free. You've already paid for it as part of your subscription. Now that said, those are all considered individual resource items. When you think about Cloud Build, that's a shared per account thing. And therefore, every account, regardless of subs you have, is 60 minutes free. Then after that, it's 5 cents per minute after. Okay? Load testing, free 15,000 virtual user minutes, and then you'll notice the cost per user after this. But that does require Ultimate. Ultimate is the only SKU that has access to the load testing client side. So to talk to the server side, you have to have that. So you do get some free. And then finally, Application Insights. This is something new. We'll talk about that later. That said, it's half off right now. And for the foreseeable future. So even if you have a mixed team and you say, well, we have 5 people we need to pay for, you can get it for half that price, depending on what you want. And they're going to give you 30 days notice before they pull the plug on the offer and make it full price. But you already know what the full price is, so you can do your budget. Okay. Questions about that really quick? Make sense?
How does it relate to Microsoft Partner?
That's really easy answers. So it works the same way for MVPs. I have my MSDM subscription as an MVP, and that account gets my MVP level features. I get Visual Studio Ultimate, so I have access to all the Ultimate features for free for my account. But that only counts for me. Anyone else in my account has to have theirs. So a good example is one of my coworkers, Ian Griffiths. He's an MVP also, so he's free also. My designer does not. My designer right now will be using a free bucket, or we're going to have to buy him a platform subscription or have him buy, we're going to have to work something out because he's going to have to fit in the free or pay bucket. Partners are the same way. Depending upon your competency, you get a certain number of MSDN licenses. Whatever your MSDN licenses are, you get those. The key is to make sure they're bound appropriately to people's live IDs. Is the big thing. The interesting thing about the way they've done it too is they've found a large percentage of customers that have purchased MSDN, but people don't use them. Because what happens is someone in Corp goes and gets the ISO, puts it on a corporate share, deploys it via System Center or whatever. So people don't use it. So on one hand, they want people to make better use of their subs, but now you are having to identify and bind humans to these subscriptions. Yeah, but if you're a partner, it's whatever you know. So if like for example, if you're in the ALM competency, you get a certain amount of Ultimate licenses. If on the other hand, you're the exchange competency, or information worker competency, I don't know what they call them these days. I think you guys only get pro or premium, so you would get only that level. Okay, security, live ID only today. Definitely, federated identities come in the future. Vetting person's going to say absolutely ADFS, and OAuth coming sooner than later. Facebook, Google ID, those are all possible. In fact, when Brian Perry first demoed Visual Studio Online, he logged in with his Yahoo ID. There's a number of reasons why they haven't enabled other identities, but it's something that they can support if it becomes an important customer feature request. But definitely ADFS and OAuth are things that they will be implementing sooner than later. Network, it's always HTTPS, okay, so that's good. And as I said, it's Windows, Azure, storage, blob storage, table storage, as well as SQL Azure for your data. Okay? And they do, people wear walls, Microsoft look at my stuff. A, they really don't care about your stuff. But B, the number of people that have access to get to your stuff is super limited. I mean, I know a lot of guys in the team, and even like Brian here, they don't have access, A, definitely to the physical data center, but even to get to your collection of stuff. I've had, particularly as an early adopter, we take stuff, early, so sometimes we have pain, and they will ask every time, can we go look at your account? I'll report something, okay, we're gonna go look. And I know exactly who is going. In fact, like I said, I know the 2 or 3 guys that have access, they're fairly senior, they're the guys that I get to put you in touch with Madhu, he's gonna take a look at it. And he's the one who has access to go look at my data, okay? Even when I did in the export testing, they don't tell you like how big it is, because they don't really know. They can't go in and poke at your stuff. It's not accessible to them because of the way they've designed the Azure cloud infrastructure. So your stuff is about as private as it's gonna be. For you folks over here in the EU, the biggest issue you might be concerned about, well, between the way the NSA acts and GHQ, I guess it doesn't matter regardless, but since they don't tend to obey our own laws. But that said, right now, if you do sign up, your data will be stored in US data centers. The current deployment is only out of the North America central data center in Microsoft Azure Cloud. They're actively working on their global deployment strategy to where when you sign up for the account, you'll be able to choose where you want, as well as they're obviously, in the case of the EU, working to make sure they satisfy EU requirements for EU customers. So today, you have to be aware, though, you're agreed to be in a US data center. Microsoft does have 2 private data centers over here in the EU, one in Ireland and one in Amsterdam. And I know one of the guys at Microsoft actually moved over, he's relocated temporarily, he's been actively working on the global plan, but he's actually over in the Netherlands now. He's been there for almost, I think it's been more than a year. And so they're actually looking at how do they try and satisfy both regulatory as well as customer concerns we wanted in an EU data center. That said, this sort of gets into me, between politics, legalities, what the governments do and don't do, and the fact that, well, if it's a US company, even doesn't matter, I don't know how this stuff works. Microsoft even does have Azure services available in China. They have a very special setup for that. So it's something that they are looking to do, it's just not available today. Performance, you have to deal with the fact that it's central right now. I've never had a problem with it. The guys I work with, overall, it's been really good, but I have had some complaints. It's not as snappy as you want, and the guys have good lines on their end here. So you do pay some transatlantic cost, depending on what you're doing. But from the beginning, it was designed as a WAN-based product. It works really well, and they've taken their lumps. They've tried to make it better. They've had spikes, especially after they made it public and really put the marketing push out there. So they have had some growing pains, and they've acknowledged that. It's not been perfect, but it's been really good. And overall, except for recently, up until launch, I actually can tell you I hadn't been down for more than an hour or 2. And I've been on the server, at this point, it'll be 3 years in June. That said, unfortunately, we did have some downtime, and you can read about it on Brian Harry's blog. That said, it never really affected us too bad, but there were times it was like, wait, what the hell's going on? I'm having trouble. And here's some availability data you can look at.
This might be a side topic, but what kind of guarantees? I mean, if we've got a big code base up there for a customer, we've got a liability. What happens if it just does disappear? And you say it won't, but Apple lost tons of customer data. Compensating them with 30 quid.
So right now, I'm not a lawyer, so you'd have to look at the SLA that Azure provides. It's the overall global Azure SLA. Right now, they don't really have an option that they're not going to get your data. Right now, their best effort is 99.9% is what they're saying. Okay, so there is a guarantee based upon the SLA, based upon what Azure provides. That said, I have not, mostly because it gets into way more legalese than I can stomach. And I'm just not in a position to deal with it. I don't know what they guarantee. I don't know if there is anything more than a guarantee. The other thing is, there's no guarantee for free, right?
Well, yeah.
So now the next thing is, okay, now, but I am paying implicitly. I honestly don't know.
Can you store your backup? Can you pull your backups off of this or platform?
So that's what I said earlier. So right now the backup tool is in preview. You can do that now up until May 20th, and then they're going to take it away, and then it'll come back online.
Oh, that's the export thing, but that's a kind of trigger. That's not an automatic thing. Is it?
No, there's not automatic. No. Automatic is you take the tip of your repository, and you do it up. Now, if you use Git, on the other hand, Git gives you a complete backup, so Git's a little more robust in that regard compared to TFS, so there's trade-offs that I'll talk about. But at the end of the day, things like work items usually take a copy of the top level, but you don't get, there's no automatic thing. There's definitely no gimme cycle backups. This stuff is mostly for your reference in case you're new to TFS, but basically your account is more equivalent to a project collection in a server. You have one collection, you can have any number of team projects. Team projects where you put all your good stuff, where you track your work, where you set up your list, all that good stuff. And a team project can manage any number of Visual Studio solutions and projects. You don't have to have one per type of thing. They're fairly heavy weight. You don't want too many of them relative to the number of Visual Studio projects. People tend to sometimes create more than they need. That said, you can have hundreds, but once again, showed you what you have. Name can't change. Description is optional, but you can change that. And then process template and version control flavor. The 3 built-in templates are available: CMMI, Scrum, and Agile. And as I said, you use them as they are. So if you want custom fields, you can do that. Whereas on premises, I can add custom fields for you. I can add custom work types. All the things that are there that you do your work. Process templates define your workflow. For example, when I create a bug in the Scrum or the Agile templates, it's just a bug. It's active. It's ready to be dealt with. In CMMI, well, it's pending. It's something that has to be triaged, right? There's a different workflow. CMMI is a much more formal process, lots of checkpoints, auditing procedures and stuff that are built into the process. Whereas, obviously, Agile template based on its name and the Scrum template are more friction-free, lightweight type of templates. But they both have all the same core work items to gather the same data. It's just the CMMI calls it a requirement, Scrum calls it a backlog item, and it's a user story in the Agile template. Okay? The key is that the collection you pick determines the overall process. Now, the nice thing is that you can mix and match. You can have one team project that is using a formal template, another one using Scrum, and another one doing Agile. It's the project level, though, is the boundary. You can't do it within and change. And once you pick it, that team project is on that path. Okay? Review the docs, can't customize. And once you pick it, you can't change it. You literally would have to create a new team project to move your data over. Now, when you have people, you have users, groups, and teams. Users are mapped into teams as members. Team projects have one or more teams. And this is useful when you have large projects where you want to be able to see different backlogs in the filter summary, so you're not seeing everything. Like, we work on the UI, we only care about that. I work on data, I want to see that. As well as it's useful when you have teams that work on different stuff and have different schedules, but there's shared code, there's a lot of stuff that goes together, but we want some separation. So it gives you the benefits of a team project without the overhead of multiple team projects, and yet you can have individual backlogs, you can have individual schedules, but you're on the same process. You're still doing Scrum, you're still doing Agile. You get a default one, which is whatever your team project name is. So when I created this project earlier, I have a team that is implicitly known as the DW DSO 2014 team. I can come in here though, go to my admin option, and just click new and create a new team. Okay, and in fact, I did this already. If we go over here to my team list, whoops, I'm in the wrong screen. Let's go over here. We look at a project I created earlier. I had the Jotunheim team project, and if I come down here to the drop down and I browse, you'll see I have the Asgard and the Midheim teams. Can you tell someone saw Thor: The Dark World before he did this demo? Actually, I did rewatch it. So the point is here, if I go and navigate, I get my own homepage. I can have different members across the different teams, and I can have independent backlogs and independent sets of work. Okay, so it's really up to you on how you want to do that. Groups, on the other hand, are a primary security mechanism. On premises, we have the notion of Active Directory groups, as well as Team Foundation server groups. Today, we don't have Active Directory integration, therefore, we only have the notion of what are known as VSO groups as a way to logically group people together and then just add the groups, and you can do that at the admin level.
How do you add someone just through their live ID?
You just add the live ID. In fact, I'll show you. If I go over here to Jotunheim, I can go over here and say manage, add user, just start typing. They don't, Nicole's not in and my daughter, so I would do this. And once I add her, an email would be sent to her automatically telling her you've been added. Right, obviously I need an email that's bound to live ID, okay? And then it gets out. On the other hand, Ian, who I do work with, he's in here because we have two different live IDs depending upon the projects. And I just pick the one and he's good to go, okay? And then you have a lot of options. If you go to your profile, there's a bunch of important stuff here in the profile. First off, you can set your picture. If you don't set your picture, and I'll show you what happens if you don't. Let me add someone I know does not. There's a guy named Ed Thompson from Microsoft. I had some issues with Git, and I added him to one of my projects. Notice Ed is ET, because what they do is they take your initials and they just pick a color. In fact, if I were to go to, how about, actually, just go back and go to browse. So this is a real project. Notice I have quite a few people that have chosen not to. One is choosing a logo from Hunger Games, and the rest of us have our profile shots. So really, it's up to you what you use for the picture. If you don't, they make one up for you. But back in here, the other things you need to be aware of: display name. And so notice I put this because I have multiple live IDs, so I have different. I put my company initials in there. Preferred email. That might be different than your live ID, right? A lot of people have live IDs that they never check the free email from. They just use it to log into Microsoft stuff. Well, no worries there. You can change that. UI, basically, it's the default or high contrast for accessibility. Locale, this makes a lot of sense probably to you guys. You probably want the US settings for date, times, etc., so you can change that as well as your time zone. Credentials, this is important if you're going to use Git. Most Git clients don't know, only Microsoft knows how to talk live IDs. So if you're connecting from Xcode, you need to define and turn on your alternate credentials, and this provides a way for them to authenticate via OAuth. And then finally, there's a connections feature, and you notice this has managed Azure websites, has been connected. This is their long-term plan. Right now, Azure is the only thing you oversee here, and there's nothing you can add or do here other than revoke. But long-term, they want a platform that lets you plug in. They maybe want to plug into Heroku, or yes, even Amazon, right? They are trying to build an open platform, but of course, they started from scratch. They built a new Azure platform. So here's TFS that got started back in 2002, right? They released in 2006, the first version. Well, they started working on this, let's just round it off to say 2009, right? So yeah, they're playing catch up as far as to get to those things, and extensibility is a big one that we don't have. Because their big issue is, of course, if you're paying for it, they want to make sure it's running. But you always blame them, even if you're the one who screwed up because you had a custom code. So they're working on it. So those profiles are important stuff to get set up. Okay, adding users, blah, 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 really easy, getting connected. I need a modern version of Visual Studio. Team Explorer everywhere works, so if you're working in the cloud, you can do that. Any Git client can connect if the team project, of course, has that. And ultimately, I'm specifically focused on getting connected because I want to do dev work. You just need a web browser that supports HTML and JavaScript. So all the major ones work: Opera, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, of course, and Internet Explorer all work fine with it. I've already talked about this and showed you that. Let's talk about the backlog and task board. So whenever you start to work on a project, you might need to figure out what you're doing, right? For any good team, you have agreed upon set of work you're doing, so you need a backlog. So the first thing you do when you create a new team project is you want to configure your scheduled iterations. What are our time boxes? They give you this default setup, which is 6 sprints with no dates. You can reconfigure this what you want. I have some team projects that just are rolling work, so they have sprints that are just the names of the month, right? So it releases the year, then I just do it that way, okay? Whatever works. If you pick the Agile or CMMI templates, these will say iteration 1, 2, and 3. You can, as you're going to see, call it what you want. Okay, it doesn't matter, they don't care, but I'll leave it the way it is. And you pick a start date. Today would be a good day considering it's brand new. And we'll go 2 weeks out, and we'll say 16th. And then what they'll do is, if I do that, they go, oh, okay, well, our guess is you want to do 2 week sprints. And they'll go forward like that. Okay, come over here. We'll do one more. And I'm good. I can turn off these future ones if I don't want people using them. Close it. Now, watch what happens to the home page when I refresh. If you look here, sprint 1, and this are kind of examples. I refresh, and what's going to happen is that I now have the dates here, but it's still using examples because I haven't done anything extra work. So the next step you want to do is define your work areas. Work areas allow you to categorize your work items. So let's say I have 20 user stories or 20 PBIs I create. And one's primarily focused on accounting, another one's focused on the travel stuff, or whatever you're building. You can then segment your work items into categories, so then you can run queries against them, and it's also how the reporting system works on premises. So I might come in here, and let's say I'm building, the canonical, just generic application. So we need UI, services, and of course persistence. I mean, something as simple as that. I could do something more exotic if you're doing products. Right? If I was trying to do the next version of Office, I might have nodes that are Excel, Access, PowerPoint. Underneath Excel, I might have sub-nodes, and you can have children, right? And it's up to, I think, 14 levels deep. If I remember the numbers, it's definitely over 10. But I can have rich hierarchies that let me really get granular on the way I categorize things, because these work areas are on every type of work item, a bug, a task. They all have this so you can categorize and slice and dice things. So once I do that, I now can come over here and start managing my backlog. Now, so far, by the way, everything I showed you is in the free stuff, okay? So I can come over here and create a new PBI. As a user, I want a fast system. I never see a request like that. As a user, I want a pretty system. As a user, I want database experts. Okay? And just boom, 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 I'm doing those. Now, a few things to be aware. First of all, I spelled this wrong. So what I'll do is I'll come over here and double click, and I get the form. So I can say system. Okay, life is good. I can assign it to some. I can specify the effort. And think about effort, this is just any measurement you want to use. Story points is a popular mechanism. So we'll say this is 10 story points, and we'll say the business value is, let's see, fast, 100. Very important. Save it. Okay, now you see the efforts show up. I can go, I want a pretty system. We'll always downplay how designers work and say it's a 5. I'll assign it as the owner here, and business value is 50. I can also add tags. And those will show up here on the side. This will come over here is performance. Okay, save and close. and then we'll do one more. We'll put database, since we decide that we want to do that first, so I'll just use drag and drop. We're going to say the effort here is a 3, business value is 75, I'll be the owner, and I didn't do any tags, so we're going to do tags, data, DR, disaster recovery. Right, so now the cool thing is now with these tags I can go over and I can filter, say show me all the UX ones, show me the UI one, get rid of that. Right, so it's a nice thing. And the cool thing is on the service now, I can now filter on it, but I can also query with work out of queries. I can even have permissions, so they've done some work there. So now the question is, well, how much can I get done? One of the things you want to do is often forecast. So you can, if you're using the effort field, you can turn on forecasting, and based upon a velocity of 10 story points, they're going to say that, well, basically, you can get this done in sprint 1, and these are going to be done in sprint 2. All right? On the other hand, if I come over here and decide that as a fast system, this is really going to be, 15 story points, right, watch what happens. They say this, but then you know that this is even going to fit based upon your velocity. Okay? And then over time, as you create these work items, you'll get a velocity chart, which will show you how you're doing. In addition, as you work, you'll get a cumulative flow diagram, and you also have a burn down chart. So now I've got some work defined in my system. Now the question is, when do I begin? Well, this is the first time, so we'll drag that onto sprint 1. We'll put this onto sprint 2, and we'll put this onto sprint 3. From there, what I can do is I can go to my board, and this gives me a Kanban board, which allows you just to kind of see your work in flow format. And you just see it at a high level. And what I can do is on this first one, I can say, you know what? This is approved, and this is committed. And you see these numbers up here, and what happens is when you cross the threshold here, your basically work in process limit, it'll turn red to kind of indicate that you're kind of taking on more work than you basically do. And now if you look at my cumulative flow, we see we've got things at different stages. Now this is something that's not really good yet, but we're at the beginning, so we'll accept it. Then over time, what we want to see is that nice flow. We want to see nice little wavy flow waters. If you see lots of spikes, right, you see your overall planning process and your overall delivery is not working well. Okay? And the cool thing you can do here, this is one of the places that does have customization, you can add additional steps and change the flow of it. Now, once I'm at my high-level work level, I can go to the sprint itself, and the first thing I can do is go in and define the capacity of my team. So right now, Brian's the only one on here, and I can say that I can do maybe, 6 hours a day. I can choose an activity. If you're doing Scrum, you typically leave this blank because everybody's a team member developer in Scrum. If you do like to break things down, you can pick a primary activity. The downside is you can't split people across activities. So it's good and bad, and you can specify the number of days off. So if I come over and say that, well, I'm going to take off tomorrow, I've got 1 day off, right? And then I can also say the team is going to take off, we'll make Monday a holiday. Right, and what this is going to help me do is just get some rough planning. So basically, based upon the number of team members I have 48 hours of work that I can do. So then if I come over here to my backlog, whoops, I always forget to do this. Save. Now if I go to my sprint backlog, I can go create work. And here's where I can assign if I'm doing more traditional project management. On the other hand, if I'm doing, where people pick up work off the board, I'll leave it blank. Specify the work, and typically you do this in hours, so I can say 8. I can adjust the backlog priority here within my sprint backlog if I want. And here's where I can get into that work activity, the area, where I specify that this is for data, okay? If I had set this on the parent PBI, it would be inherited automatically, just like the iteration is. So I can save this. And now notice what happens to my team work. I see 8 hours, and I see this is unassigned. So let's add another one. And we're going to put this at 50 hours. Now watch what happens. It goes to red, because it's trying to show me that I have more work allocated than I could possibly get done. Now the cool thing about this, if I go to my home page now, I'm going to see the same thing. I'm going to see that data right up in my face automatically. Now here, after the first day, so then as you shift, once you hit midnight on UTC, you'll start seeing a burn down, right, for your work. If I go back over, to the my backlog, and I come in here and I can change this, of course, and say that's not reasonable. We'll put it down at 32. And then what will happen, once I do that, I then can come over here to the board, and let's say I decide I do want to do some work. Drag this over here, and I can assign it to myself. Now when I go over here to my capacity, I can see that Brian's assigned 8 out of the 48 hours. So it's just a nice, simple project management tool. Okay? And you also have access to your burn down here once you start burning down work. Now another thing you have the ability to do, and this is not free, you have to have at least the advanced or higher, is the ability to create charts based upon my work item queries. So for example, I can see how I have blocked tasks. And I can even pin this to my home page. So what happens, anytime someone marks a task as blocked, you can run this query and see that. Well, the nice thing is, how do I know I need to run the query? Well, now that I've put this on my home page, they'll run it for me and tell me how many units. So anytime someone hits the home page, they can see that there's an issue. So this is really good for things like impediment-related queries, blocked tasks, open impediments, those things. But I also might want to create additional queries so I can have charts. We can say, show me all the work items by type. And I can save this. By default, it puts it in your My Queries. If you want to be able to pin it and create a chart, you're going to want to save it to your shared queries. Then you can click Charts, assuming you have the right account, and you can say, why don't you show me these by work item type? And I can do a donut, I can do a bar chart, right? All sorts of fun stuff here, that doesn't make sense. Click OK, and create another one based on the same query. We'll do it by assigned to, we'll go to pivot, and for rows, we'll do work item type. Then I come over here and the same thing, I can pin these to my home page. And there you see it, okay? So those are nice stuff. So the key thing is, free can view, you have to have an advanced or an subscription above Pro to be able to create charts. Now, the last thing I want to show you that's related to work items is that they've added enterprise features. For a lot of teams, sometimes PBIs are all you need. But sometimes when you're looking at a larger product, you want to see some high-level things. You want to think in terms of maybe features or epics or something. And so they have a new feature that they effectively call Enterprise Agile that allows you to come in and define high-level artifacts. In addition, they've added better relationship and filter management. So I create a filter for so I can add it just like a backlog item, but you'll see it's a little different. It has, for example, a target date. So I might want to say that this is something we want by the middle of the year. Okay? We can rate the business value. We can use similar metrics. We can raise the priority. We can assign it for someone who's the owner. And I can save this out, and then what I can do is, this is 1214, so if we think about my other ones, I can link it to my PBI implementation. So if we do 1210, I want to create a system. Perfect, I guessed it got that. Okay? Now what I can see is not only my feature, but I can say, well, show me the children. And from there, show me, and if it's children can have it. Now this one doesn't have it. But I can do the reverse. I can come over here and say, show me my backlog items. But then I want to come over here and see backlogs to features. And so now it shows me all my backlogs and even those that have apparent features. So I can do either or views of things. And then I can also come over here and say, show me the tasks. And now I see that parent-child relationship there. Okay? So lots of good stuff there. And the system has email notifications. Another premium feature is something called a team room. Now, I'm not going to do the demo. I'm going to show you ones that I've already played with. But basically, a team room serves two purposes. Number one, you can come in there and have conversations like I am. The benefit about having it, and I'll show you the one I did yesterday, is that when you're doing it, you get an honorable trace that survives the conversation. So if I come over here to yesterday, you'll see I did some stuff in here. And the cool thing is I had a conversation, but also I can track events. Now the nice thing about the conversation, well, why would I use this over IM? And I actually had a block to this when I first saw it. The reason you want to have this is because it lets you have a trace history of what's going on and why you feel like, why did the build break? Well, here's what we figured out. We're still with people in different distributed teams, but it gives you a central audit trail in one place.
All this happening in emails and they get wiped out.
Exactly. So this gives you a nice traceability. You can go and jump around by date. And you can also turn on events where you can see which work items are changed, updates into version control, the files that are added, you get a nice view of it. So it really gives you that history. It's really good if you've been gone. Well, what did the team get done yesterday? So really nice.
Is this feature available in the on-premise version?
Yes, it is. Okay, so you have that. Version control, core component. We now support Git repos. The big thing to understand about it is a constant evolution, right? They're constantly updating things. Oops, I thought I had a different slide there, so I'll stop. So let me show you real quick with version control. I already showed you updating my real website. So if I go over here, I can of course see all the stuff in Visual Studio. You know, working with version control, I can view history, etc. But even in my web browser, I have the ability to come in, go to my web project, and I can go to the Code Hub. I can see lots of great things. Oh, let me just show you on the home page. You can have tiles representing changes to version control, as well as your build history right on your home page. Those are other tiles you can add to the front. If I go to code, I can come in here and see and browse my repository. Okay? And if I want to go down, I can take a look at history, I can look at change sets. I can click on the details. And then here's the cool part. It'll show me the changes to the file. Okay? That's pretty slick. I can also come in here and just go to the Explorer and browse around. And if I drill down to the file, I can view the history of that folder. I can download it as a zip. I can control security. I can, of course, just look at the history for that particular area as I drill down. Get further down, keep going into the folders. And then finally, if I go to the home, I will see there's that change I made there. I can then look at the contents. I can then select index. I can view it. I can even compare it. Notice I'm getting color coding and diffing all within the browser. So really nice stuff. You can even come in here and add lightweight comments. Oh, sorry, this is Blaine, right? Showing you the revisions, who did what and where. Okay, so that's really nice. And then when you come over to a review, you can come in here and add annotations. And these become a part of the overall history as comments, but they're not. It's not part of the check. It's just kind of a lightweight code review. Okay, so really good stuff. Now, Git support is awesome. It works exactly as you expect as a Git client. But I'm going to show you something that's actually pretty cool. So the problem is, I created this with Team Foundation Server version control, which is centralized. It's really good for teams that want to know what's going on. You want exclusive checkouts. You only want to download the tip. Right? The problem with Git is when you clone a repo, you get everything. One of the beauties, you get all the history, but the downside is you get everything. And so if you use your repository to store ISOs, large image files, you're having to download all that stuff. Git wasn't optimized for that. It's optimized for source code. So Team Foundation version control makes sense for a lot of teams. But sometimes there's developers that work offline a lot or traveling, like myself. And wouldn't it be great if I could use Git? Well, the problem is my team project's Team Foundation version control. Well, the cool thing is, with Visual Studio supporting Git, I can now have local repos. And because Team Foundation server, and Visual Studio Online both support Git repositories, it turns out they've done a lot of work to make this wonderful, to the point that I have a local repo that's connected to my changes up in Visual Studio Online. In fact, to prove the point, remember I made that change earlier when I changed the website? If I come over here to my local repositories, using the GitHub client, I want to prove that this is industry standard Git. If I go to main, what we're going to see here is I made a change from the top 2 hours ago. All right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a command line. Unfortunately, this is only available as a command line client. And it's part of a separate package called GitTF. I can come down here into my Git-based repo for this project, okay? And I can do git-tf pull. Now I've already configured it, knows who I'm talking to because I'm in the right directory, etc. I use my alternate credentials, okay? Oops. Now watch what it's doing. It's going up to Team Foundation version control, pulling down my changes and merging them into my local Git repo. So that now if I go back over to my GitHub client, notice my new change I just made earlier. Now here's what's slicker than snot. I'm going to come over here. Guys, do you have that phrase from the UK? So I was going to, I don't know, slick as an icy walkway through a bog. I don't know. I come over here, do File, Open, File, if I knew how to use my mouse. Select that index file. Come down here. There's the change. Whoops, save it. Go look at my changes. Okay, I can commit this to my local repo if I want. I can also do it here with GitHub. The GitHub client sees the change. Okay, to prove a point, I'll commit it here. I'm going to commit it. Now the change is local. I can come over here, refresh. Actually I didn't refresh, I didn't even pick it up. So the change is committed to my local repo. Now I come over here, git tf, push. Oh, sorry, commit. Wrong command. Okay, what is the command? I forget. Oh, it's check it. I forgot they changed the syntax to the point. I don't have any changes locally. And I'm not mapped to another Git repo, so I can't push. But I can check in. Provide my credentials again. And this is where the money comes in. It's going to do this. We come over here to the website.
So that was a TFS check-in.
Look at my history. I just made a check-in right now. And if I go to the Build Explorer, I'm going to have a new build that's going to kick off in a couple seconds. So, once again, just a really, really good system. Now, things that are coming, lightweight-based code editing. So basically, be able to do code editing in the browser with IntelliSense. They have support for HTML and JavaScript. Later, you're going to, they can do any language they want. Visual Studio in the cloud is coming. Load testing, bottom line is they take up all the hard work. You just have to have the right licenses. Works really well. And then this new feature called Application Insight. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We had builds. The cool thing about builds is you can do hosted builds in the cloud. As you saw, I kicked off my web application, just ran. You also, though, can bind an on-premises build controller. So maybe you have specialized things that can't be built up there, or maybe you're using a pre-release that's not been put up to the build servers. You can mix and match with those. It's also a way that you can, for example, integrate a custom build server running for OS 10 projects, because Apple doesn't let you virtualize OS 10. So you can have your own OS 10 build server and have the data by hooking in things like Jenkins and hooking into the build infrastructure. App Insights, bottom line is about looking at component usage. If you're familiar with things like New Relic, this is right in that category. It's all about monitoring availability, but as well as telling you what features do our users use, how often do they use it, where are users coming from, etc. And this is a preview. And you'll notice when you go to your home page of your project, this is something that they're gonna encourage you to try. If you look on the home page right there, okay? And you can see I've set up a bunch of stuff, and if I go over here to one of my examples, we can see my availability exceptions. I've had 100% reliability. I have had an exception event recently. Looks like there's an execution step failure. I can double click into it, get event date details. I can even get an IntelliTrace file. And there's some really good stuff in here. Performance counters, what's going on. I can add a bunch of stuff and see what's going on. I have what they call global system monitoring. So if I go to availability, and if I go to this one, right, I can have different scenarios where they check the landing page availability, as well as scenarios. The cool thing is you can just do ping test, basically simple availability, or you can create what's called a web performance test in Visual Studio, which will do an HTTP protocol test and hit different web pages and test responses and stuff, and it will run that on an interval that you specify.
Is the impact of that your website is up or?
Well, it's up all the time. It's based upon how can you hit it. I've got mine running every 5 minutes from all these different locations.
I thought their idea was they take your website offline when nobody's using it to save you money.
Well, those are two different things. You're conflating how I decide to run my website versus how I want to test its availability. If you're the one poking the availability, it's going to cost you because it's going to spin up.
Wake it up.
Yeah, that's your choice for how you want to do this. Those are orthogonal things. You know, how if you want to just save money, yeah, do the cheap thing, and you hope it's available when you go to ask for it. The other thing you want to check, and you control the interval. I've set it at an aggressive side for the charts to show. Other people are going to set it, you're going to set it lower or higher, depending on what you're doing. If you're Amazon, you don't care, right? You've got to be up. In either case, something worth looking at. Keyword that changes, news, service status, release archive. The release archive, this has actually a screenshot from February. There's going to be new updates if we go there. The other thing to be aware of is let Microsoft know what you want. VisualStudio.uservoice.com. You can vote on things. When they changed the UI in 2010 to be very dark and gray and black, people revolted and complained, and they at least showed up and had the unicorn doing some nice rainbow pooping on Visual Studio, so it has a little color. We got the blue scheme in 2013, and that's because people let them have it. So you come in here and vote. The key thing though is you get this release schedule, and you'll notice that some things are listed as future updates. So this feature showed up, create tags permission on February 10th. It's a future update. If you scroll down, and it has been released on premises, you'll see which release it's in. Okay, so the bottom line is, get connected without barriers, cross-platform development, software as a service where you can focus on your apps and let someone else deal with infrastructure. And ultimately, they're trying to be very aggressive and agile, 3-week sprints, give you value on a regular basis. Thank you for coming to my session. I hope you enjoyed the talk as well as you're enjoying DevWeek. Take care, travel safe, and if you need to get in touch with me, there's my info. Bye-bye.